If you look at a map of the known universe, you see all these massive multi-billion-dollar efforts to map out dark matter. We build these colossal telescopes and launch probes into the absolute void.
Right, yeah. Entire academic lifetimes are just completely dedicated to understanding this invisible force that supposedly binds galaxies together.
Exactly. And we demand absolute mathematical precision when it comes to the cosmos. I mean, humanity wants to measure it, quantify it, and basically reduce it to an equation on a chalkboard.
We need to know exactly how it works.
But then you take a concept like love, which is arguably the invisible force that binds humanity together, and suddenly that scientific rigor just vanishes.
It completely disappears, yeah.
We are totally fine treating it like this hazy, undefined mystery. And that massive contradiction is exactly what the philosophy we are diving into today tries to dismantle. The premise here is radical, honestly.
It really is.
It argues that our entire modern definition of love is a lie, and that what society actually means when it uses that word is, well, nothing more than a selfish extension of our own ego.
And just to set the stage for you, the listener, the source text we're exploring today is a very dense, highly philosophical, and heavily opinionated monologue. It tackles the fundamental nature of human potential.
And it does touch on some pretty politically charged themes, historical figures, and intense societal critiques. So we should clarify right up front, we are acting strictly as an objective guide to these ideas today. We aren't taking sides or endorsing the viewpoints. We're just impartially unpacking the core arguments, regardless of how controversial they might be.
Right. Our mission is just to explore the text and see what it's actually saying about the paradox of modern society.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the text forces you to look at how affection is routinely weaponized.
Yes, it really goes after the idea of familial love. Think about how a protective instinct is so often used as a justification to inflict harm on anyone outside of your immediate family circle.
Right. The scenario that really drives this home in the text is the image of a thief. Picture someone, stealing to feed their wife and children.
In their own mind, they are driven by noble, loving, totally selfless motives.
Exactly. But to the person they are robbing, to the family whose resources they just took, they're simply inflicting suffering. Or look at organized crime.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Hardened criminals will absolutely revere their own mothers, right? They would literally take a bullet for them. But they will ruthlessly rob, harm, or even kill someone else's mother without a single second of hesitation.
That cognitive dissonance is the core issue here. When affection is conditional and based solely on proximity to you, it becomes a shield for aggression. And you can scale this up from street-level crime straight to geopolitics.
Wait. Really? Like, how far up does it go?
Well, look at the rhetoric used by Vladimir Putin toward Ukraine. Specifically, the text cites the phrase, "Like it or not, endure it, my beauty."
Oh, wow. That is a chilling example to unpack. Because it frames an invasion, literally an act of war, with the language of a toxic domestic relationship.
Right. It is a pathological, twisted version of affection. It reveals an abusive, domineering mindset that's masquerading as care. It's rooted in a destructive philosophy that equates dominance with love.
And the text actually points to Konstantin Tsiolkovsky to counter this exact mindset. For context, Tsiolkovsky was one of the founding fathers of modern rocketry and astronautics.
Yeah, a brilliant scientist.
Historically, people wildly misconstrued some of his radical ideas, claiming he wanted to wipe out biological life or destroy animals. But his actual goal was to push humanity to evolve past our base animalistic aggression.
He wanted us to outgrow this exact, flawed, ego-driven tribalism that just inevitably leads to violence.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here. Are we really equating a mother's natural protective instinct for her child with a mob boss protecting his turf or a dictator invading a country?
The text argues the underlying mechanism is the same, yes.
That just feels like a massive jump. I mean, what is inherently wrong with having a walled garden? You nurture what's inside the walls, you keep it safe, and you prioritize your own people.
What's fascinating here is how the text answers that exact pushback. Because what happens outside that wall? If your definition of care requires you to poison the soil outside your garden just to keep your own plants safe, it is not love.
It's just a biological survival tool.
Exactly. It's tribalism operating on autopilot. Yeah. The ultimate critique of humanity here is that true love must be unconditional and universal. And yet, we haven't built a single academy to study the objective anatomy of love.
We just accept the walled garden as the highest form of virtue without ever questioning the damage it does to everything outside the gate.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. To break out of that walled garden, we have to look at how this philosophy redefines true love. and that requires digging into ancient linguistics.
Mhm.
Specifically, the old Slavic etymology of the word for love, which is Lyubov.
Yeah, the roots of Lyubov are totally different from our modern understanding. They translate literally to "people know the divine."
People know the divine. That completely strips away the Hollywood narrative. I mean, it has absolutely nothing to do with physical attraction, butterflies in your stomach, or even emotional attachment.
Nothing at all. In this framework, affection means recognizing the divine spark, the ultimate developmental potential in every single living being.
So you're acknowledging their capacity for intellectual and spiritual growth.
Exactly. Regardless of their external flaws, their social status, or their past mistakes. It is an objective observation of potential, not a biological urge to possess them or be near them.
There is a really powerful scenario in the text that illustrates this. Imagine telling a group of people that you love, someone who society considers completely unconventional or even socially unacceptable, like someone living on the extreme fringes.
People usually react with disgust to that. They ask, how can you love them? They are a mess. They are pathetic.
Right. And the author's response is simply, I love them. Not because they are emotionally attached to their current state or because they want to date them, but because they recognize their hidden developmental potential. You see the spark beneath the dirt.
Which requires immense intellectual discipline. You have to separate the current reality of a person from what they are fundamentally capable of becoming.
I like to think about it like a shattered, virus-infected laptop. The screen is cracked in half, the keyboard is sticky, the fan is just screaming, and it's barely running.
Most people would take one look at that hardware and throw it straight in the trash.
Exactly. But Lyubov, knowing the divine is like ignoring the broken physical casing and recognizing the absolute genius of the underlying operating system.
And once you recognize that operating system, it completely changes how you interact with the machine. You stop judging the cracked screen. You stop getting frustrated that the keys are sticky.
You focus entirely on how to salvage the hard drive.
Right. You try to debug the software. Your entire relationship with that object becomes about restoring its core function rather than reacting to its damaged exterior.
But, possessing that knowledge isn't the same as actually acting on it. The text expresses this deep frustration with esoteric and religious groups who actually know this ancient etymology.
Oh, this is a major critique in the source.
They memorize the definition, they know it means knowing the divine, but they treat it like trivia.
They treat this profound ancient knowledge like a finished puzzle they can just put on a shelf and admire. They fail to use it as a starting point for rigorous philosophical inquiry.
Because if you truly believe that every person contains a divine spark, it demands a radical overhaul of how you treat strangers.
Absolutely. How you structure society, how you spend your time.
Yeah.
But that requires hard, uncomfortable work.
And because we refuse to put in that rigorous work, because we would much rather judge the broken screen than learn to read the code, we end up settling for something much easier.
We buy cheap simulations.
Yeah, I want to ask you, the listener, to reflect on this for a second.
Yeah.
Are we just paying for emotional simulators? Because the modern landscape is painted here as a bleak downward spiral where people actively avoid the friction of real connection.
People opt for the illusion of intimacy. They pay for prostitution, they engage with escorts, or in the modern era, they form incredibly deep romantic attachments with artificial intelligence and chatbots.
It's wild. People are spending hours a day building relationships with neural networks, and they know full well there is no soul, no actual feeling inside the machine.
It is literally just predictive text algorithmically designed to mimic affection.
But that mere simulation of intimacy is enough to pacify them. It completely cuts them off from reality. The irony here is staggering. People are willing to die for the illusion of love, but won't spend 10 minutes logically analyzing what it actually is.
Because an AI companion doesn't require you to recognize its divine potential. It doesn't challenge your intellect. It just feeds you validation.
It's easy.
Exactly. It is a critique of the superficiality of our entire digital existence. Humanity is acting like an addict. You see it in influencer culture, too.
Oh, for sure.
Content creators stare into a camera and say, "I love you all so much," to millions of anonymous subscribers. The audience eats it up, absorbing this simulated affection to fill a void.
The text even views concepts like body positivity through this critical lens. The argument is that society uses these movements as a shield to justify physical and intellectual degradation.
Instead of striving for health or self-improvement, we demand that society validate our current flawed state so we don't have to put in the effort to change.
It brings to mind the biomechanical art of H.R. Geiger.
Yes, the artist who designed the creature in the movie Alien.
His work is terrifying, honestly.
It is, but it's the perfect metaphor. Geiger's art is full of these horrifying, interconnected biological and mechanical parts where tubes feed back into themselves in an endless closed loop.
There's consumption, but no actual creation.
Exactly. That is the metaphor for our modern cycle of mindless consumption and base gratification. Humanity is plugged into these digital tubes, feeding on its own illusions, consuming simulated love, while our actual evolutionary potential completely stagnates.
By constantly choosing fleeting dopamine hits, whether that's alcohol, meaningless physical encounters, or endless scrolling on social media, we are voluntarily dulling our own cognitive software.
We really are. And if we are successfully pacifying our deepest need for connection with digital simulations, we have to look at the devices actually enabling this loop.
We're holding literal supercomputers in our hands, but we treat them like digital pacifiers.
Think about the historical friction required just to have a thought. Pythagoras, Isaac Newton, Leonardo da Vinci.
Right, these minds made foundational, world-changing discoveries using crude tools like parchment and quill pens.
They had to grind their own pigments to make ink. The sheer physical effort required to record a mathematical theorem was immense. They had virtually no technological leverage.
Yet they built the foundations of modern science, physics, and philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at us. We have voice-to-text, neural networks, 3D printing.
We have the sum total of all human knowledge accessible in milliseconds.
And what do we do with it? We use these miraculous tools to harvest virtual carrots in mobile games. We watch endless loops of mindless videos.
We have a Ferrari engine, and we use it to power a golf cart.
So what does it all mean? The text heavily critiques modern consumerism, specifically targeting massive smartphone manufacturers.
Companies that employ thousands of the most brilliant engineering minds on the planet. And instead of tasking those engineers with solving renewable energy or space travel, their entire objective is to engage in planned obsolescence.
They intentionally slow down older models to force you to upgrade.
Or they dedicate billions of dollars in research and development to make a camera lens like 2% sharper. They are making minor cosmetic upgrades to trigger a dopamine spike in a consumer who just wants the status of owning the newest iteration.
We are wasting generational genius on selling slightly shinier glass rectangles.
It's an evolutionary plateau.
And the alternative proposed in the text is wild. It suggests taking 64 mobile processors, clustering them together in your living room, and using that combined computing power to run subatomic physics simulations at home.
Which is an incredible concept.
But wait, let me push back on that. Clustering 64 processors to run physics simulations. Is it realistic to expect everyday people to act like particle physicists in their free time? I mean, someone who is exhausted from a 9-to-5 job, dealing with a commute, paying a mortgage, the cognitive load of modern survival is already maxed out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's not about literally forcing everyone to become a quantum physicist overnight. The core argument is about intent.
Intent, okay.
The warning here is about the danger of handing our cognitive responsibilities over to artificial intelligence. If we build AI based on humanity's current informational garbage, our superficial social media trends, our simulated influencer affection, our virtual carrot farming, we are creating a pocket god out of our own degradation.
Wow. We are feeding the most powerful tool in human history a diet of absolute junk and then asking it to solve our problems.
Right. We should be using these miraculous tools to augment our own divine spark of creativity. Instead, we are outsourcing our thinking so we have more free time to consume passive entertainment.
And to break that cycle, to achieve the level of focus required to actually use our technology properly, the philosophy advocates for a lifestyle that most people would find unbelievably extreme.
Oh, it is a deep dive into asceticism and intellectual purity.
It is a radical rejection of base physiological urges and the societal expectations that dictate modern relationships.
There is a fierce critique of the pressure placed on men to constantly pursue women, to pay for their attention, and to center their entire existence around securing meaningless sexual encounters.
The rhetoric takes direct aim at relationship dynamics, specifically calling out quote-unquote gurus who actively teach women to be parasitic on men to extract financial resources in exchange for simulated affection.
It treats the entire modern dating scene as a transactional marketplace devoid of actual connection.
And the view on physical intimacy that lacks a rigorous intellectual partnership is just jarring. The text refers to it as interacting with sweaty meat.
It is a visceral, deliberately uncomfortable phrase.
Yeah. It really is.
It strips away all the romanticism and reduces the act to sheer biology. The argument is that engaging in this purely physical exchange is a massive hemorrhage of energy.
Energy that could be spent on reading, on mastering a science, on genuine self-improvement.
The philosophy champions intellectual virginity and purity. It points to historical giants like Newton, Immanuel Kant, and Nikola Tesla.
These were men who largely refrained from base physical urges and romantic entanglements.
Exactly. By ignoring their biological programming, they achieved total dedication to higher intellectual and spiritual goals. It is a practice of ultimate energy conservation and redirection.
And that demand for purity extends to all physical vices, especially alcohol. The analogy used is brilliant, actually. It says drinking alcohol is like taking a hammer to a computer.
It intentionally degrades your processing power.
Right. You have this incredible, complex processor in your skull, and you voluntarily ingest a toxin specifically designed to slow it down. Why would you deliberately smash the very tool you need to understand the universe?
It's a powerful question.
But looking at this practically, painting almost all standard human relationships as a distraction feels incredibly intense and uncompromising. I have to ask, couldn't true partnership, even with its emotional complexities, actually enhance intellectual growth? It doesn't have to be a solo journey in a dark room.
This raises an important question, and it's a crucial caveat in the text. Partnership is valued, but only if it functions as an equal intellectual collaboration.
So it has to be a meeting of the minds.
Exactly. If two people are actively pushing each other toward that divine spark, challenging each other's biases, and collaborating on scientific or philosophical discovery, that union is highly valued.
But the underlying belief is that those types of relationships are statistically almost non-existent today. Most people are just settling for the simulated affection we talked about earlier.
Ultimately, this intense rhetoric is an invitation to wake up. It is a demand that humanity unplugs from the matrix of biological programming, consumerism, and the societal expectations that keep us docile.
We have covered massive ground today. We started by dismantling the selfish, ego-driven nature of what modern society mistakenly calls love. We explored the old Slavic etymology of recognizing divine potential, looking past the cracked screen to see the operating system.
We navigated the tragic illusion of buying digital intimacy.
And we unpacked the intense call to stop wasting our miraculous technological hardware on virtual farms and fleeting dopamine hits.
It demands radical self-reflection. It asks us to stop hitting our cognitive computers with a hammer, to stop pouring our energy into meaningless physical transactions, and to start writing new, revolutionary code for the trajectory of our lives.
Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder. We talked about the danger of training artificial intelligence on our current superficial data. Imagine a truly objective AI or even an alien species looking through our telescopes from the other side of the void.
If they were to judge humanity purely based on how we spend our free time on the internet today, what would they actually see?
Would they see a species striving for the stars, recognizing the divine in each other? Or would they see a species entirely trapped in its own digital illusions, harvesting virtual carrots while the universe waits to be explored?
It really forces you to question what kind of matter we are actually made of.
It absolutely does. Thank you for joining us on this intense philosophical exploration. We encourage you to question your own daily routines, look past the broken screens around you, and ask yourself what you consider to be your own divine potential.